Here is the one interval that medieval church musicians were genuinely afraid of. They had a nickname for it, the devil in music. Play F up to B and listen to what happens. Your ear will not sit still on it. It leans, it pulls, it begs to move somewhere else, anything to escape that sound. That restlessness is not your imagination, and it is not a trick of the recording. It is built into the exact distance between those two notes. This interval is called the tritone, and it is the most unstable distance in all of Western music. Hear it one more time, F up to B, and feel how badly it wants to resolve. By the end of this you will know precisely why it does that, where you have heard it 100 times without naming it, and how to find one yourself from any note on the keyboard. So let us measure it exactly. The tritone is 6 semitones wide. That is the whole definition. 6 of the smallest steps on the keyboard, stacked one on top of another. There is another way to count it that gives the interval its name, 3 whole steps in a row. A whole step is 2 semitones, so 3 of them is 6, the same number from a different angle. Let us walk it from F. The start on F. 1 whole step up lands on G. A second whole step up lands on A. A third whole step up lands on B. 3 whole steps, F to G to A to B, and we have arrived at the tritone. Hear the bottom note and the top note together. That is the sound your ear refuses to settle on, and now you can see exactly how wide the gap is. 6 semitones. 3 whole steps. The name tritone literally means 3 tones, 3 whole steps, and that is all it has ever meant. But the number 6 is doing something special inside the octave, and that is where the strangeness really comes from. An octave is 12 semitones from a note up to the same note higher. 12, an even number, which means it has an exact middle. Cut the octave perfectly in half and you land on 6 semitones, the tritone, sitting dead center. Watch this. Here is C at the bottom and C at the top, a full octave apart. The one note that splits the distance into 2 equal halves is right here in the middle, and it is the tritone. Listen to the lower note and the center together. Every other interval leans clearly toward one side or the other, toward home or away from it. The tritone leans toward neither, because it is exactly halfway between them. That perfect symmetry is the source of all the trouble. With no pull toward home, the sound just hangs there, suspended, refusing to resolve in either direction on its own. So the very thing that makes it feel unstable is the cleanest piece of arithmetic in the whole octave. 6 is exactly half of 12. That balance is also why the tritone has not one name but 2. The same 6 semitones can be spelled 2 different ways, depending on the music around them. From F up to B you are stepping through 4 letter names, F, G, A, B, so that tritone is called an augmented fourth, a fourth that has been stretched 1 semitone wider than usual. But flip it over. From B up to F, climbing into the next octave, you pass through 5 letter names, B, C, D, E, F, so the very same sound is now called a diminished fifth, a fifth squeezed 1 semitone narrower. Listen to both. F up to B, the augmented fourth. Then B up to F, the diminished fifth. Identical distance, identical sound, 2 different names. Which name a composer uses is not random. It depends on where each note is heading next, on the role it plays in the chord around it. The sound is one thing, the spelling tells you what that sound is doing. For now, just hold on to the simple fact, augmented fourth and diminished fifth are 2 names for the one restless interval. And that restlessness has a long and slightly dramatic history. Centuries ago, in the music of the early church, this interval was treated as something close to forbidden. Singers were drilled away from it, melodies were written to step around it, and theorists gave it that grim Latin nickname, diabolus in musica, the devil in music. The reason was not superstition for its own sake. To ears trained on smooth, settled, sacred singing, this leap was deeply unsettling. It pulled too hard, it sounded too unresolved, it would not let a melody come to rest. So they avoided it. Listen again to what they were avoiding, F up to B, and you can almost hear why a quiet chapel of voices would steer well clear of it. The interval was never actually evil. It was simply so tense, so charged, so desperate to move, that it broke the calm those musicians were after. But that very tension, the thing they fled from, is exactly what later composers came to love. The devil in music turned out to be one of the most useful sounds you can reach for, because tension is the engine that drives music forward. And you have heard it driving music your whole life. Once you know the tritone, you start hearing it everywhere. Its most important home is inside a chord you already know by ear, the dominant seventh. Take the dominant seventh built on G, buried inside it are the notes B and F, and the gap between them is a tritone. That single restless interval is the engine of the whole chord, the part that makes it lean so hard toward home. Listen to that tritone inside the chord, B and F together, straining. Now let it resolve. The B slides up and the F slides down, and the chord settles onto C, the tension released. That pull, from the tritone out to a calm resting chord, is one of the most fundamental motions in all of music. And it is not just classical harmony. The tritone is the leap that opens the theme from The Simpsons. It growls under the shark in Jaws. It soaks through the blues and through jazz, where players lean into its tension on purpose. The sound the church ran from is now everywhere you listen. So here is the last piece, how to find one yourself. Finding a tritone is one simple rule, and you can apply it to any note on the keyboard. Count up 6 semitones, or count up 3 whole steps. Either way you land on the tritone. Start on C and count 3 whole steps, C to D to E to F sharp. C up to F sharp is a tritone. Try it from another note. Start on E and count 3 whole steps, E to F sharp to G sharp to A sharp. E up to A sharp is a tritone. Hear each one. The exact pair of notes changes, but the distance never does, and the unsettled sound is the same every single time. That is the entire trick. You do not need to memorize long lists. From any note at all, 6 semitones up, or 3 whole steps up, gives you the most restless interval in music. Now you can find it, name it, and hear it coming. So the tritone is 6 semitones, 3 whole steps, sitting dead center in the octave and splitting it into 2 equal halves. That perfect balance is exactly why it feels so suspended, with no clear home to fall back to, and why it carries 2 names, the augmented fourth and the diminished fifth. The church called it the devil in music and ran from it. Later composers chased it down, because that desperate pull is precisely how music builds tension and then releases it. And here is the thread that ties it all together. Everything we have done is about the distance between 2 notes. Stack a few of those distances on top of one another and you stop building intervals and start building chords. That is exactly where this is heading next.